Producers always say that, the prop man joked, until you ask for a raise. Paxton laughed again, and Jamie smiled as she listened to the banter. The producer had that kind of laugh that made a person feel good. "Have I ever denied you a raise, Bob?" Paxton asked the prop man. Bob shook his head. "No, Tim, you haven't," he replied. "But then you've never given me one either." They both laughed again, but as Tim walked over to Jamie, a more serious expression came over his face. "You need an escort back to the hotel? I've got a meeting, but I can get someone." Jamie held up her hand. "No, Tim, I'll be fine. I think I was just, getting into my part too much the other night." Tim smiled. "Okay, that's good to hear, but let me know if you need anything." "I will," Jamie replied. Tim nodded and moved on, making sure to say hello or to joke a bit with most of the cast and crew before they left the set. "That Tim Paxton is the nicest guy in the movie industry," Maureen, the red-headed costume lady, said as she watched him disappear into the crowd. "Yeah, he sure is," Jamie nodded. "Not like some others I could mention." They both cast a glance toward Dirk Fallon, who was busy chewing out his cameraman. "Yeah," Maureen added, "I'd like to take him over to makeup to be bloodied instead of this dress." Jamie laughed in spite of herself. "Well, I've got to change. I'll see you at the trailer in 5, Maureen." Maureen nodded, but she didn't glance Jamie's way. She was still staring at Fallon and shaking her head. 20 minutes later, Jamie Baylor walked toward the Golden Crone Hotel, feeling better than she had in nearly a week. It was strange enough being only 17 and acting in The Vampire Returns, a horror movie, but filming in Transylvania put things somewhere out in the zone of weirdness as far as she was concerned. Everything was geared toward vampires here, even the hotel. When Bram Stoker wrote his Dracula novel 100 years ago, there wasn't a Golden Crone Hotel in Bistrita. But because he had one in the book, they wound up building it decades later. And that wasn't all. Bistrita was full of vampire landmarks, from the names of the hotels and ruins of nearby castles to the items on the menus in the restaurants. With dishes like vampire steak and the Count's chops, it was no wonder Jamie had a hard time separating her role in the film from reality. At least that's what she told herself tonight as she walked through the dimly lit streets. It was the only explanation that made sense. Oh, sure, since filming began a week ago, she'd twice thought she'd seen a real vampire on the streets at night. But what else could she expect in a place like Bistrita? She shuddered as she recalled the first sighting. She figured it had been someone in a costume, but the second time she was sure whoever or whatever it was had been stalking her. It had started with echoing footsteps behind her. Every time she had stepped, someone else had stepped. When she stopped, sure enough, she heard footsteps shuffling to a quick stop behind her. That's when she turned around. And that had been her mistake. That was when she saw yellow eyes and a long black cloak. And that was when she ran back to the set screaming, making a total fool of herself in front of the crew. She sighed at the memory. Of course, they all teased her about taking her role too seriously, but that didn't change anything. She was still sure she had seen something not quite human. "Oh, stop it," Jamie scolded herself. "Stop thinking about it. It wasn't real." She shook her head, determined to put the whole ridiculous incident out of her mind when, step. A chill swept over her. It was the footsteps, just like before. She continued walking, her ears straining to hear every sound around her. Most of the time the steps matched hers, but not always. She sped up her pace. The footsteps tried to keep up. Her breathing increased. Someone was stalking her. There was no doubt about it. For an instant she thought of turning around and looking, but remembering how horrified she had been the last time, she decided against it. She couldn't bear seeing that face peering at her again. So she began to run. The sound of her tennis shoes on the cobblestones beat out a rhythm in her mind as she raced down the street. There's no mistaking the sound that followed, heavy boots clacking on those same cobblestones. She reached the top of a small knoll and began to run down the hill. Fog covered the bottom, a ghostly mist patiently waiting to wrap about her. The gray and beige buildings towered above her head. They were